Hi, this is Peter Teuscher. I'm here with Toby Demker. Welcome back to our podcast. Thanks again for joining us. This is where we pick a topic, have a conversation, and see where it goes, and hope that it informs you, inspires you, gets you interested in these topics. We talk about everything from personal development, leadership, culture change in organizations, and a bit of philosophy. And it's stuff that that interests us, and we're trying to learn from. And as always, I'm sure we're going to have another great conversation. How are you doing today, Toby?
I'm very good, thank you. Yeah, it's beginning of May. Things are getting brighter. Vaccines are starting to roll out. So yeah, feeling there's a lot of external factors making me feel good. But
Fant-
I mean, it's all good actually. Yeah, thanks.
Fantastic. Well, that's a topic I don't want to jump into. I think that occupies
No,
too many conversations. But one thing I did want to point out is that a funny stat. So I've been the guy who does my marketing, gives me lots of our data, and it's funny because the podcast is growing. Lots of people are interested in listening to us, but on YouTube, not so much. So I can only come to one conclusion, as they say in the business. Maybe I've just got a face for radio. And but look, as long as people are listening, I'm happy. We talked in our first episode about purpose, and our purpose is really, about having deep conversations and hoping that then inspires other people, because it's all about spreading the knowledge, or at least having conversations that lead to a better understanding. So I'm excited for another conversation. It's my turn today, and today I'd like to talk about self-sabotage. It's a topic, or it's related to a lot of the coaching that I do. It comes up in various forms. And so it is something that really affects all of us to some degree. And so I thought it was a really valuable kind of topic to touch on and to engage with you
sure.
on.
Yeah. No, it's a very deep topic. I'm not sure where this is going to lead us actually, but that's one of the fun parts about this these conversations that you don't know where the end is. And I got some ideas about self-sabotage from a leadership perspective, I guess. But why don't you kick us off with some of your thoughts, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, so I think what I'd like to talk about today is really, a lot of people might not understand what it means to be, to self sabotage or why, but people come to me for coaching, and you know, uh, almost always what stands in their way aren't so much the external circumstances and sort of the challenges that life brings you, as much as their own internal mechanisms. So people
Mm,
tend to be their own worst enemy. They tend to stand in their way, more than anything that's external. And so
mm,
all of that kind of points towards self-sabotage. And I think when people go, well, I'm competent, I'm a doer, I get things done. We first need to look at it from a biological standpoint. For one, from our thought processes, our brain takes in a tremendous amount of energy. And so we biologically try to find ways to, conserve energy. So we've talked before, maybe we haven't talked before, but about heuristics, where, the brain takes shortcuts and makes assumptions. That's where our biases come from. It's all
yeah.
about, being more efficient. And the body does the same. And, we have two kind of basic drives. So to attain rewards and to avoid threats. And so the rewards is a lot of times what motivates people, to do things, to go out of their comfort zone, to face challenges. But then that's balanced off by avoiding threats. And sometimes when that avoiding threats or risks really becomes more prominent, then we start to avoid things that are in our best interest. And that's when that sort of self-sabotage mechanism kicks in. So have you
Hmm.
ever experienced that with the leaders that you work with, or the people in industry that you work with?
I mean, I'm sure everybody's come across that with with other people, with leaders, with colleagues, with ourselves, probably, and Yeah, in terms of leadership development, I think we've touched upon already a few things that goes hand in hand with this, and that's kind of our false assumptions and the the false assumptions or the obstacles that we put up for ourselves to become efficient, either if it's a leader or if it's just as personal effectiveness or efficiency. So I think we've all come across it. Just wondering how to define it a bit. Self-sabotage. What makes it? I mean, I guess the self is quite self-explanatory, but the sabotage part. How would you define it? For me, it's something that you destroy for yourself, or you sabotage something for yourself, or is it just an obstacle that you make up that is hindering you from getting where you want to go? Um,
Yeah, it's
from your perspective, what is it? Yeah.
well, it's ways that we find to undermine ourselves, and a lot of times it's unconscious. Sometimes it's the excuses we make. One of the most common examples of self sabotage is procrastination, right? And there are a number of reasons for that, and I want to get to that. But I guess maybe we can start with. I'm wondering if we should start with, what's behind self-sabotage or some of the signs. But I'm kind of wondering, maybe we should start with some of the signs that you're self-sabotaging, because what
Yeah.
self-sabotage is not like, it's not always that obvious. I mean, obvious examples of self-sabotage are, drug addicts who've so they've become physically addicted, and but that behavior started somewhere in distracting themselves and trying to avoid the using behaviors that undermines their own success to overcome, to deal with their emotional state and so on. So that's probably not a very good example, but in extreme cases we do things like that undermine our relationships, that undermine our job performance, that undermine, we don't go for the things that we really want to in life. We make excuses. So those are all kind of more typical examples of self-sabotage. So yeah, do you want me to? Actually made a few notes for myself, because this is an important topic to me, because I come across it in coaching a lot. I'm sure you working with leadership development will, people won't be ready to admit it that much, but I think one of the benefits and one of the things I really want to get across about this conversation is that it affects everyone without exception, just to varying degrees. And so
But I guess, yeah, just to point out, I I think I understand where you're getting. And to me, the really important part seems to be that this is something that probably, or most cases, happened unconsciously, right?
for
That
sure.
it's something that's going on, and yeah, I mean, I actually think that if you're talking about from an addiction point of view, the starting point, sure. I mean, that's nobody plans to become an addict of anything, right? But it's something that grows up on you, and that maybe it's an extreme example, but I mean, it's probably more common than we think that we have these kind of issues.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
but then
actually,
on a day-to-day basis, sure, there's so many things that we all do, I guess, that is, in that sense, self-sabotage. And so I don't know where to draw the line. It says, where is it sabotage? Where is it common, slightly ineffective behavior?
yeah. Well, it is both unconscious and conscious, because even though we don't call it self-sabotage, we recognize our behaviors or our habits that don't serve us, right? We recognize them when we do them anyway. And we kind of, feel like it's out of our control or whatever, or we don't want to control it. And I guess the addiction one is a poor example. I'm not an expert on addiction, and so there are multiple factors that lead to that. So it's probably not a good reference point. I regret having gone there, but that's the spontaneity of our conversations. But it is both conscious and unconscious, and so the benefit to that is, the things you're conscious of, then awareness allows change. So once things come to the surface and you're aware of them, you can make changes. But a lot of times we're just not willing to. We'll say things like, "Well, it's just the way I am," right? or I deserve to, like, we procrastinate. Well, I deserve a night in front of the TV. Yeah, you probably deserve a break, but whether that sitting in front of the TV all night is the break you need or what you really need. So it's about not giving yourself the things you need, not allowing yourself those things. And intuitively, I think we know what's best for us, but we just can't seem to do it. Why? I get that question, and I've asked myself that question enough times. I know what the right thing to do is. Why don't I do it? Right? And so it's a number of fears. It's risk avoidance. It's a lot of things. So so let me just jump into, and you can interrupt me anytime you have a question. But I've written down some signs that I find are typical for people or they're signs of self-sabotage. So one that I come across a lot in coaching is that people who are too hard on themselves. In other words, they're perfectionists, and so they tend to have a fear of making mistakes. And so that fear, or that the mechanism then to avoid the mistakes, is just to either not do it or never get finished, or just set such high standards for yourself that that there's no way you could ever succeed, and that's a form of self-sabotage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, to that. I mean, I can relate to that in a very close way, because I mean, I have someone very close to me who is a real perfectionist in that way. And if something isn't according to the wishes of this person or to that standard, this person becomes extremely uncomfortable, and that can take a lot of different, quite weird behaviors. And I think I talked about before this immunity to change, right? That there's a big assumption there, assuming that if things aren't for this person, and if things aren't perfect, it means something. It means that I'm not secure, or I'm assuming that I'm not going to get the results that I want to have or I want to see. So there's something else pulling this person back. So. I mean, when we talk to immunity to change, it's more on a reflection basis. But from a coaching perspective, that's really, really helpful. How you can dig into these assumptions, dig into, what's at risk, what's going to happen if we don't have that perfection, etc. So, I mean, from a coaching perspective, it's a really interesting conversation.
Absolutely, and that whole not wanting to change, staying in your comfort zone, that's a very clear risk avoidance strategy, right? So not wanting to make a mistake. So if you try, then you could make a mistake. The chance is there, right? So so that's one sign. I've already touched on procrastination. That's a really big sign. That should have probably been at the top of my list. But people who are always putting things off to the last minute, the more you do it, the more you put things off to the last minute, and the more you create that habit, the more that you'll procrastinate in the future, and it increases stress levels, and then you get frustrated with yourself, and then the more you get frustrated and down on yourself, the more you will procrastinate, because you start to lose faith in your own ability to get things done. So, I think we've all experienced some degree of procrastination. It's normal. It's just, and I think with everything, all these signs that I'm going to talk to you about, the thing is to recognize, okay, is this just an annoyance, or is it really getting in the way of my success, right?
Yeah, I think that's an important point there. I mean, if we look at, for instance, judging and perceiving in MBTI, I mean, there's the dichotomy there. There's a difference of wanting to keep a lot of options open to the last minute, and the other part is like getting it done as soon as possible and minimizing the options, right? And I'm a little bit in the middle there, but at certain points, I can see that I'm so much more effective if I leave things a little bit later. If I try to do things early, I'm not focused. I'm not getting it done. It's not a good quality. So for me, at least, there needs to be some kind of balance there. If I procrastinate too much, obviously, and I feel the fear or the an extreme pressure that, oh, now I'm putting it too late, then I'm in trouble. But if I started too early, then it doesn't really work for me either. So for me, at least, I really need to find that kind of balance to make it work. Does that
That,
make sense?
yeah, absolutely. It's funny because you've recognized the things that motivate you, and sometimes a certain degree of pressure motivates you, helps you get more focused. So we talked before about managing your stress, and that is part of managing your stress. Recognizing where good stress helps you focus, gets you really on track, and really helps you build momentum. So again, it's recognizing these signs and understanding when they actually create a negative environment for you. So so yeah, there's a difference, right? And there are degrees. It's always a spectrum. So and sorry, I've just realized that I didn't plug in my laptop and I need to plug it in. Sorry about that.
No, all right. No worries.
So glad we've got things really professional here at the podcast. Anyway, so I it was distracting, so I needed to get it done. But anyway, so again, recognizing when these things get in your way is the key here. So that's why these are just signs, and then you can evaluate for yourself how prominent they are in your life and how much they affect you. So yeah, a little bit of procrastination is normal for everyone. Is it getting in the way of you being successful? And I think, and this leads to another point, which is being disorganized and chaotic. People have their method within their chaos, and it becomes easier to get things done the more organized you are. And this has taken me a long time to get into the habit of, because there are times, they say geniuses have, just the most chaotic offices, and that may make me feel better, but I don't think the genius part is necessarily the case. It's just, it's when you keep yourself in a bit of chaos, that it's just another excuse for not being able to get stuff done or for not being successful. And it's also a good indication, a lot of times your outer world reflects your inner world. So if you're unsure of yourself, or you've got a lot of inner turmoil, it'll be reflected in your external world. And that is not committing to organizing your life or organizing your thoughts. That's another sign that you're self-sabotaging, because we all have the ability to do that. And we'll talk about things like all these modern diagnoses like ADHD and not disputing these diagnoses, but I always like to point out that a lot of the psychological phenomenon is theoretical, right? We give names to certain patterns of behavior, and so if you're continually using that as a self-diagnosis, then it's important to ask yourself, I think, with all of these, am I making excuses, right? And because that's just another form of self-sabotage. Yeah.
There's one point on that. I see a difference also in your workplace. I mean, if you're an individual like myself or like many others that are working from home, working alone, maybe not in the collective setting in an organization or something, how much chaos can you allow yourself if it works for you? If there's a system within the chaos, I reckon it's not necessary to be too harsh on yourself. I have a very good friend who's a brilliant scholar, but when I looked at in his office, I was amazed by the mess. But he has perfect, he knows exactly where everything is. There's a certain stack of papers everywhere. But at the same time, if I look at a client that I used to work with, they have a what do you call it? A clean desk policy. So all of their desks are very neat. It looks fantastic. And if you're in that kind of environment, and it's respectful to others, but it's a certain behavior that you just want to see by everybody in the organization, sure, then that doesn't work. So I mean, I guess it depends a little bit on where you are, the context, etc. Right?
Yeah. And that's why it's always a spectrum. So it's always important to ask yourself, is this behavior getting in the way of my success? And for some people, the opposite could be true. Keeping everything has to be organized, ordered. And if that becomes, a habit that's to the degree that it's getting in the way of, well, I can't do this. It would screw up my process, screw up my methodology. Well, then the opposite is the case. If you're extremely organized and but so structured that you can't veer left or right, there's no flexibility. Well, that can
Yeah,
be
that could actually go into, we were talking about perfection before.
exactly that's
If
the
it
other
goes
end.
too far to the other side, yeah, then it becomes too perfect, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one is negativity bias. So when you're always looking for the flaws, right? Where you're always looking at the things that could go wrong, or you're picking everything apart. I used to work with my brother, and he used to like to say about himself, I know I'm the negative guy. We fit so well together because of the our different personality types. So I was the kind of the maverick, the trying to be the visionary and take risks, and he was the guy who would bring me back down to the ground and kind of pick out, okay, well how do we actually get this thing done if we look at it in terms of what are the next steps. And so it was
Yeah.
a good balance, but he always kind of felt he needed to add this caveat. I know I'm always the negative guy, and it wasn't negative, it was actually very constructive. But
Yeah.
but if you take that to an extreme where it's like every opportunity that comes, you find all the flaws or all the reasons why not, it starts to undermine it gives you all the reasons why you shouldn't go for something,
Yeah.
why you shouldn't, as a guy, why you shouldn't approach a woman if you're single, because, or why you shouldn't go for that change in job. You've been so many years at your job, and, change, as you said before, change is an added risk. So not going for it, or being afraid to ask for a raise, or being, there's just any number of things where if you have to go out of your comfort zone, or if you have to, try something that could risk a failure, then you start to pick apart, you start to find all the flaws and the reasons why it couldn't succeed before you even try. So
Yeah.
that's kind of that negativity
Yeah.
bias.
I mean, if we look at some theories around, especially transformational leadership and effective leadership in that sense, to be challenging is a really good behavior, a really good trait to have. Um, I always have this discussion, where's the line of being challenging and being constructively challenging, or constructively critical? And we talked about purpose before, so it's great to be challenging. You can be, as your friend there. I mean, you can be, it can become really positive. It can be extremely constructive if you think about the purpose. Why are we challenging this question? Why are we criticizing this? If the purpose is to be constructive, or to come up with a better solution, or look at options or something, that's great. But I agree. I mean, you can see circumstances where it's very get into that negative spiral, just criticizing for the sake of criticizing. And if you put that on ourselves, of course, I mean, that would be some sort of self-sabotage for sure if it goes too long.
Yeah, and especially where you talk about, if we're putting that on ourselves, that goes back to the first point about being too hard on yourself, and which is, these are all, somewhat interconnected with one another, and you can have some or all of these kind of signs that, you are self-sabotaging, and, if you're asking yourself, why are you not successful in life as you'd like, or why do you find it so hard to get certain things done, and you can be successful in all areas of your life, and then there's one area where you self-sabotage, and that's something that you can look into. And I've got some things I want to talk about when we want to look at how to remedy it. But first of all, I think it's about recognizing it in yourself. So and here's the next one is one that it's so interesting. I had a client last year who self-diagnosed as having imposter syndrome, and
Oh.
it's amazing how many this could be a topic on its own. It's amazing how many high performers and high level managers that I've worked with that or just talked to where you realize that they get to a point in life and they doubt that their success is part of their own actions, or they're just lucky, or someone's overseen. We see ourselves much more critically than the outside world often sees us in many cases, and so we kind of feel like I don't know what I'm doing here in this situation. People have totally overestimated me and so on. And so we start to feel like a phony. We start to feel like we're an imposter in our role, and we haven't actually acquired the knowledge and experience to be here. And that's actually in many cases that's a good sign that we don't grow until we challenge ourselves. And so if you've overextended yourself a bit, as long as it's not too much, getting into a new role or a new life situation, it's a great way to grow. And sometimes you'll undermine that by going, I'm not ready for this, or people don't realize that I'm just faking my way through this, or it's things like that. And so imposter syndrome is one that I find it's a great sign that you are self-sabotaging because you're questioning yourself and your own credibility way too harshly.
Yeah, and that's something that it seems like almost all individuals have to some extent, right? That I hear this from, I mean, just reading and learning about psychology. I'm not a psychiatrist. I can see it in myself. I can see it in basically everybody I work with. This kind of self-doubt that is trickling in, and I'm glad that we have more and more awareness about imposter syndrome, what it is, and that it is really common, because that makes me feel a little bit more it's not just me, like everybody else has it as well. But it's also that balance, right? I mean, they say that if you have that humbleness of not being too self-confident or too sure of yourself, that shows a degree of wanting to develop and wanting to learn and listening and taking in other perspectives. So there's also a balance of that to allow yourself to doubt and to question things in a healthy way, I guess.
Yeah, and there's a real mix of people, and I wonder sometimes, because I have had just recently actually I was working with someone who actually I was wondering, does this person have an accurate assessment of themselves? And I don't know if this is a generational thing where. Because I hear this criticism all the time, and I think it's unfair to sort of have a blanket criticism of a whole generation. But this sense that people of a certain generation have a sense of entitlement, and they overestimate their abilities, and I think especially when people are ambitious, I almost wonder if that's a strategy. They're trying to convince themselves, and so they lose that humbleness, and they're all about talking about, I'm so good at this, and I wonder if they even believe it, right? So you've got the opposite end of the spectrum where people are talking about how good they are and seem outwardly very convinced of themselves, but I find a lot of those people are actually the most insecure, especially the people who you go, wow, you think, wow, that person's a real braggart, or they're very arrogant, right? And often that's a mechanism just to try and compensate for their own insecurities. They're trying to project outwards the super confident side of them, and it comes across as arrogant. So because it's not authentic, as we talked about last week.
Exactly. I was just going to say that taps into exactly what we talked about before, that that lack of authenticity. But at the same time, if we're being too authentic, like I think we talked about that last time as well, that if we're being sort of too authentic and showing ourselves as, I mean, there's a great power in vulnerability, and we know this from a lot of books and research and talks, that there's a great power in vulnerability and transparency, etc. But do we need to throw, the whole self or all of our hearts or thoughts on the table? Again, I mean, there's a balance between the spectrum comes back again to where does it become healthy? Where does it become self-sabotage? Where is it healthy? What's the healthy mix? And I don't know if there's a exact recipe for what it looks like, but it takes a lot of thought process and reflection and maybe feedback as well to find that what works for you.
Yeah, I think with all of these things, it's important to find someone you trust to get some feedback from. So, if it's in the workplace and you have a good manager, you talk to them about it. If you have the level of trust to be that vulnerable in front of them. But, obviously, I believe in coaching, and I always recommend it. I think people underestimate the positive effect that coaching can have if you find the right coach. And I still get myself, I let myself get coached because it's hard to coach yourself. But any person you can talk to, or any way of self-reflection that helps you be objective, because it's hard to be objective. You're seeing you're having the experience from within yourself, and
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
and it's hard to assess or to recognize, are you being fair on yourself, and so on, and then really asking the difficult questions, or having a real honest answer about, is this really affecting my life or is it not? So, people will brush things off and go, well, it's no big deal, I cope, I get through. But yeah, you may be getting through, but you may be causing yourself an undue amount of stress.
Yeah.
And you may be, I'm all about helping people find their own highest potential. So, this is a big roadblock to people achieving their potential, and they'll say things like, "Well, I don't really want that anyway," and that's it's a great way to undermine and self sabotage by not aspiring to what you're actually capable of. So.
Yeah.
Just the last two quick points, and they're interrelated. So, overcommitment is another great sign that you're self-sabotaging. So, it's trying to do too much. It's almost like when you're trying to prove to people how and again, all of these are interrelated. So, sometimes you'll find these people who have this imposter syndrome. They try and compensate by committing to everything and doing way too much and being super busy,
Yeah.
and maybe not being super effective, and then just causing themselves to totally stress out. But they say yes to everything, right? They say yes to everything that. So if you're a real doer, so getting things done, but as long as it's within their comfort zone, and then they just commit to way too much of their time, and just that whole being committed to a ton of things makes them look super busy, also stresses them out, helps them overcome things like imposter syndrome, or even being too hard on themselves, and that leads into the kind of last one, and that's this feeling burnt out. So I think that the two are very tied to one another, but you have this overcommitment, and then that ultimately leads to people to feel burnt out, to be totally, they just hit a wall, and they that's a great way to create changes, to create to push things so far that it leads to crisis, right? And then you're forced to change.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just when you were speaking about that list, I was also thinking about a few things that could add to it, and one of those things is like that the difficulty of saying no, and maybe that goes into to saying yes to everything. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of people can recognize that is sometimes you just want to say no, but it becomes very difficult. And why is that? Is it insecurity? Is it imposter syndrome? I don't know, but there's a something tells us that we can't say no to things. We don't want to be the no sayer or whatever, and that can create a lot of problems, obviously. And then it's um, there's I talked about this before, and this relates to some of the things that you were saying, but this sense of being really competitive, and that can go into perfection, as you talked about, but also be a little bit I mean, over the top competitive, that you need to be the number one all the time, or you need to be on top of things all the time. There's no room for that insecurity, that goes into competing, and then the avoidance part of taking a step back, and that can show up as perhaps arrogance or avoidance, or I mean, just if it's arrogance, it's just like, well, that's stupid anyway, right? Why should we do that? And then that can be sort of a self-talk, or it can be seen as extremely arrogant towards others, of course.
Yeah, and it
And
depends on the situation that you're in, because sometimes there's risk in getting too close to people, and then you keep people at arm's length, or you put them off with your personality, and that, even though you're not recognizing it's a strategy, and it is self-sabotaging if you find it difficult to make friends or build close relationships. Sorry, I think you had
yeah.
something else. I didn't want to cut you off there.
Yeah, no, that just exemplifies better what I was saying. And then the last part is about being too compliant, and that goes into not being able to say no, but just saying yes to everything, and being maybe not really speaking your mind, or just trying to fit in too much, and that can really become a problem and really undermining your effectiveness as a leader, as a coworker, or whatever. And that can be, I guess that can be defined as self sabotage as well, if it's hindering your effectiveness to that sense, right?
Yeah, and then if you go back to sort of the where we started on trying to define this, anything that you do that undermines your own ability to achieve your potential, or that stands the way in your success of any area in life. Again, it could be just it's not like you're going to self-sabotage everything in your life. I'm sure there are individuals who do that, but certainly for most people, it'll be one or two areas where they just, maybe it's
Yeah.
your nutrition, maybe it's your health and fitness, or maybe it's, you feel like you've been stuck in the same role in your job for too many years. And so it's any number of things, whether it's
Yeah.
personal, social, work related.
Yeah, yeah, good. I mean, that because it puts a little bit of context what we're talking about here. Because we started talking about maybe drug addiction or something, and we can think about eating disorders and really extreme cases that are really common. But that's not really what we're talking about here, right? It's more
No.
subtle things that are in our day-to-day lives that are. Um, Probably a lot of them are unconscious, maybe a little bit consciously as well, but it's just hindering us to be effective in hindering us to be, I guess, more authentic, actually, to get to what's important for us and what we care about. And
Yeah.
that, to me, that's a kind of when I'm saying effective, it's not being, efficient or effective as a robot. It's really about getting in aligned with your purpose and getting the things that are really important to you, getting that done, putting the first things first, so to say.
Yeah, it's all about getting out of your own way, and
Yeah.
so that's a big part of the coaching process. People don't recognize how they're getting in their way, and so it's just about reflecting, and that's why I wanted to go through the things that I thought were signs, and you've come up with another few great points that I think if people take the time to self-reflect or get some coaching, they'll start to recognize the different if they're not being successful. And so you, listener, if you're not finding yourself being successful in a certain area of your life, then a great place to start is to look at, okay, how am I personally undermining things? Because in terms of, what are you can only change the things that you're in control of, right? So a lot of times we like to point to all the things that are getting in our way, or problems in our lives that we have no ability to change. They are circumstantial. So going back to looking at, okay, what can I change? And what you can change is all the little things that you're doing that are causing you to screw up, or causing you to not get motivated, or causing you to fail, right? Causing you, you're sabotaging your own abilities to succeed. And sabotage sounds like a very strong word. It sounds like espionage, but really, it's just ways of undermining your own ability to get where you want to go in life.
Yeah. Maybe also maybe highlighting the point that some of it, uh, perhaps not all, but a lot of the self-sabotage that we're putting on ourselves is actually happening because we think it's protecting us, right? So we're doing it to feel safe, or to protect us. So it's a really natural behavior. I mean, it's actually behavior that is probably from physiological point of view, it's protecting us and it's supporting us. Uh, but of course, then if we look at it from a more holistic point of view, if it's hindering us from doing what we actually want to do and authentically want to do, then it's not going to be protective. It's just an obstacle for being the authentic self, so to say. So there's I was just thinking, I don't know if we talked about being below and above the line as a sort of mindset.
No, bring it
Uh,
on. I'm interested to
oh,
hear this from you.
well, for me, that's in coaching and leadership development, that's something that I refer to all the time, and it's this natural state of being below the line where we might be complying or denying or arguing or defending, or it's all these behaviors that our reptile brain is sort of programming when we feel under pressure or stressed or whatever, and it triggers these kind of behaviors that are. Um, that are just not productive, right? But they're trigger behaviors that we think are protecting ourselves. So they're very natural, and we it seems like when we're under stress or under pressure that they are very, very prevalent. They're all the time. But if we can realize that these are actually what we call below the line behaviors, that we have an option to go above the line and sort of starting utilizing our cognitive thought, our rational brain, and started thinking about things and thinking about the choices we have. So what could I do to create another output here, or taking the personal responsibility of what could I do in this situation, what else could I do, if there's anything that I could do in this situation to make things a little bit better, what would that be? So it becomes, it becomes a mindset of being outcome creative. So it's a positive spiral. If we start doing things that are where we aspire to put a positive twist to it, to take some kind of personal responsibility to do something about it, we create better results for ourselves and for our environment. While below the line, it's kind of a reactive stage. So um, we come into victim mode, that things are happening to me instead, and therefore, our area of action really decreases, and we feel, we become less productive.
Okay, so
Um,
when you're talking about below the line, you're not talking about unconscious. That's not the subconscious mind. It's more the reactive self, the kind of spontaneous, habitual responses that you can recognize, but they just feel out of your control. Is that what you're referring to as below the line?
yeah, you can say that. It can be both conscious and unconscious. Most of the time, it's unconscious, because
Mm.
if it becomes conscious, that we start thinking about what we can do instead. It can also be, and I've recognized this a lot of times, that I feel like, well, I'm actually below the line now. But I'm too tired to do anything about it. I don't have the energy, or I just, for now, it makes me it makes me feel better. I don't have the energy to do anything about it, and then it's my choice. But then I'm conscious about it, right? So it
Okay.
can be conscious things, but most of the time, of course, it's unconscious. Yeah.
So it's recognizing when you are sort of, you know that it's, well, because I know it's because I'm just hungry that I'm irritated, or is that it, when you're kind of reverting to things where, well, you start to recognize that it's just kind of these impulsive behaviors. I'm still trying to get a sense of because my whole thing about awareness allows change. So once you recognize something, you bring it to the surface, and then you're able to change
Yeah.
it. So yeah,
Okay, so how do you recognize if you're below the line?
yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's obviously the tricky part. Well, first of all, it takes a lot of awareness, but for me, I think about this a lot, and it can be self-talk, it can be, ideas or thoughts that are coming into me, or just mood as well. If I'm feeling moody or whatever, or self-talking that things are shit or things are bad, and then when I'm saying these things, that okay, I realize that I am actually below the line now, and I have the option to go above the line if I want to. Can I do anything about the weather? No, but what could I do to make me feel a little bit more comfortable, whatever it is. So there's a choice there. So that's one part from the individual perspective. The fun thing about this that I used to work with an organization. We had this as a ground rule in the organization that we could. First of all of us knew about this, right? We know about the concept of being below and above the line, and second of all, we knew that it was common and natural to be below the line. So it's not no judgment there. There's just a natural place to be. So we sort of had the permission to remind ourselves to be above the line. And that was really interesting because sometimes, I can take many examples, but, one example, we did this activity and things didn't really work out the way we planned. And we talked about it afterwards. And the natural reaction, in this case for me, was, well, we said that and that, but they didn't listen. And yeah, the all of these below the line behaviors. And then my colleague was just, well, let's stay above the line. And then, oh yeah, that's right. And that just, it turns the conversation to a more constructive, just constructively challenging, proactive discussion. Okay, what is it that we can do then to make things better? But it just changes the climate and the atmosphere and the quality of the conversation. So you can use it as an individual kind of mindset, which I really try to adopt on a day-to-day basis. But it's great to have it in a team as well as a ground rule. This is the way we work, and we work on this principle together, and we have the opportunity to remind ourselves that we can be below or above the line.
That's a great one. I've noted it down for myself because I haven't heard of that before. And so when you're feeling angry, then you're below the line, right? And so you're out of control. It's your emotions are overwhelming you, and then so stepping back from that and going, okay, let me gain perspective of the situation. That's kind of getting above the line. Is that
Yeah.
great? Okay,
Anger is a quite strong emotion. I mean, usually we talk about justifying and defending and arguing, those kind of a little bit more subtle behaviors and thoughts. Anger definitely fits there as well, but that's when you're angry, you're pretty. It's obvious that you're angry.
Yeah, you've got a step too far. Okay. Well, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. That's I'm gonna use that in the future. So I want to go back to you pointed to the whole risk avoidance thing. I talked about it at the beginning as well, and I think that's a great way to sort of approach then the whole act of self-sabotage when you start to recognize some of those things that we both talked about. So what risks do you perceive? What do you see as a danger? What are you afraid of? I think those are great things to ask yourself when you find yourself self-sabotaging or undermining yourself in some way. So I think that's a big question to ask yourself. And then also sort of, how do you view yourself? Some people, they think, and this is, another huge topic, but when you talk about the self and your self-image, it's a huge a piece of the puzzle because, what's your level of self-worth? What do you think you're actually capable of? And so, your belief system will limit how far you can go, how much of your potential you can actually achieve. And also, how are you measuring yourself? I talked about being too hard on yourself. There's actually, just thinking now, because I used to coach basketball, and there was a thing called sophomore syndrome for basketball players who went to university. The first year in university, they would excel, and then by the second year, they would get really discouraged because that first year there was such massive growth that by the second year, even though they were still growing, it looked like felt like they were taking a step back because they were being too hard on themselves. They expected that growth curve to continue, and really they felt like they kind of flattened out, or they reached their potential, and now they were actually getting worse. And they were being far too critical, and it was about how they were measuring themselves. If you measure yourself, your growth, for example, for when you first start to explore something, obviously there's so much new to learn that your growth is going to be exponential, and then as you kind of acquire knowledge and skills, then it's about fine tuning, and there's no way that your growth can be as substantial, right, over time. So it's just, how do you measure yourselves? How do you evaluate yourself? Those are all things that kind of feed into the things that trigger self-sabotage and so trigger you undermining yourself. So, you asking yourself, am I quick to give up? When things get tough, that's another way of risk avoidance. Well, I decided that wasn't the right thing for me, and that's a great way to self-sabotage yourself, because, well, as soon as things get tough and you realize, well, I might not be successful, then that whole risk of failing causes you to just give up, right? And then you have, I decided not to pursue it anymore. Then you have a good reason for not failing, right? So again, mindset and how you evaluate yourself is a big piece of it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, for me, that the persistence part, that's really, really important as well. I mean, how much do you invest in something to be sure that you're taking the right decision, if it's about your career or whatever it is. But again, you can take that too far as well. So again, we're coming back to the or at least I'm coming back to the spectring all the time. Sorry, but it's how far do you want to push it? When is enough enough? Have you invested enough of time and energy and efforts, etc., to make sure that this is right for you, or that it isn't right for you? But then if you come to the conclusion that it isn't right for you, should you push it further, or should you pursue something else?
So you're talking about not knowing when to give up.
Well, the balance, I guess, of not knowing to
absolutely.
to not knowing to when to give up, or when to not give up, but when to choose another path or choose another option.
Yeah. So it's like that sunken cost fallacy that we talk about in cognitive bias, where you've invested so much that you can't go back now, sort of thing. So I think with all of those things, and we'll talk about biases as well, because it's a huge topic. But I think those are the things where it really helps when you recognize, when you're questioning, well, am I being biased here, or is this a legitimate reason, or is this, have I got the right perspective? This is where coaches, mentors, just having someone in your life that you can really just share your thoughts, feelings, concerns, fears with, and they it's someone that can bring those things into balance for you. There's no reason to have to always go this alone, right? So on the other hand, everything is a spectrum, right? So if you're constantly asking other people for their advice because you're so unsure, then that's not healthy either. You need to find. It's important to develop enough confidence in your own judgment as well. And over time, if you become dependent on someone to tell you if you're going down the right path all the time, that's not healthy either. So,
and I get that's one of the great powers of coaching and coaching leadership as well, that it develops your own ability to make your own decisions and being accountable for your decisions. You as a coachee, or as a person, that you have to make the decisions yourself. It's not the coach or the boss do it for yourself. Right? Yeah. So I guess that is one of the great powers. And I agree. I really see coaching as, the way I look at it is, someone just holding up different mirrors, and the mirrors can have different shapes, different frames and stuff, and different sizes, but you can just see things from a lot of different perspectives. I don't know, when I was small, I used to go to the well, kind of the circus or whatever you call it. They had different kind of mirrors, but some make you feel look fat, some slim, some short, and it's just different kind of perspectives. Well, if you look at it from this way, it could be that, but just someone holding up different frames for you, and then it's your accountability and it's your decision to choose what fits best for you. But having looked at all of these different choices and getting some support there, it just makes things a lot easier.
Yeah.
And yeah, so
By the way, those mirrors, I think in English we refer, that's a carnival, right? Where you have these carnival attractions where you have the different amusement ride, like, or amusement
yeah,
park.
I
Yeah.
was just thinking about an amusement park that I used to go to when I was a
Yeah, yeah,
kid.
absolutely. No, that's a good metaphor for the different ways we can look at ourselves. And I mean, look, it's why I love to coach, because not only I love that whole experience of someone having an aha moment when you ask a certain question and they, wow, I hadn't thought of it that way before. But also because it reflects, I'm constantly learning. And that's also why I love to mentor people, people who are looking to gain experience and willing to learn from you. It just anchors the things that you've learned. It sometimes refreshes things from your past because you're forced to have to explain it to someone. It helps you confront your biases. So, like anyone listening, if you have the opportunity to mentor someone, I fully encourage that. Everyone has something to teach someone else. So, and it's also a great thing that you can do for yourself. It's not just giving to other people. It really helps you. So any way to sort of learn to reflect and see yourself in new ways, and that ties back into it also. Sometimes I'll be coaching someone and I'll go, actually that's really good advice for myself.
I
and
know.
it just reminds me, actually I haven't been doing enough of that either. There's just so much value in that, and then you start to see how you undermine yourself in your own ways. Just even having this conversation and going through the list again, and that's a list that I got from different internet sources, and just to compare notes with my own kind of observations of self-sabotage. So yeah, I think it's just taking the time to reflect is yeah. It's a lot of times we don't take enough time to reflect for ourselves and recognize how we're getting in our own way, but also recognize, am I living in a way that's best for me? Psychologically, physically, emotionally. Am I living in a way that's helping me be the best version of myself?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's just finding that support to overcome those obstacles or what's hindering you from, yeah, from obtaining the success that is important for you, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
um,
and I really echo that part about, I mean, now for teaching or even I mean, with my facilitation work, that it's fascinating when you're put in the role where you have to teach something, then because then you actually really have to learn it, and that process of learning it's just it's really different from learning to pass a test or something. If you have to learn it so you can convey that knowledge to someone else, it's a fantastic process of learning, and I totally agree that that is so rewarding. Wow.
yeah. I think that was one of the funnest things about our when we did our trip to China together, and we did those workshops over there. And it was amazing. You're giving workshops on stuff that but in the process of teaching it, or even the interaction. This is why I love workshops as well. It's so interactive, and people giving you feedback, and then forcing you to dig into the depths of your knowledge and experience. And it just brings back things and it reinforces things. And even after some of those workshops, because we gave multiple ones, and I gave some of those same workshops over in the U.S. and it just you start to fine tune it, and you're constantly
Yeah.
upgrading your knowledge, and I love that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's super beneficial. So I think a lot of people who come to workshops think, and obviously there's structure and things, the agenda's there, and the key points that you're wanting to teach people or pass on are there. but it's amazing how organic the process can be as well, and how much bigger it can be than what you initially started wanting to offer and present. So I love the whole collaborative process. So anyway, before we go off on too many tangents, it's one of my challenges. I wonder if that's self-sabotage, going in too many different directions. My brain tends to go off on tangents a lot. I'll have to do some reflection if that's a self-sabotaging behavior.
I wouldn't define that as self-sabotage.
So I wanted to kind of finish off with a real expert on self-sabotage is Dr. Judy Ho. I've listened to a number of her talks and interviews, and I got a lot of value out of it. She's also got a great book on self-sabotage, and she has this acronym, LIFE. It's a good way of sort of recognizing where your self-sabotage is coming from, or why we self-sabotage. And so I'll just go through her points, and then we can maybe have a bit of discussion on that before we kind of wrap things up. But so LIFE is the acronym for low self-concept, which is the areas in your life where you're shaky, where you're insecure, unsure of yourself. So that can tend to be a big causal factor of self-sabotage. Then the I is for internal beliefs, which it's a big thing. The book I'm working on, a lot of the coaching I'm doing, how beliefs or the philosophy that you've created for your life really affect the way your behaviors, and will affect things that you undermine yourself, self-sabotage yourself with. Then the F is for fear of the unknown. We talked about, change. Change creates a lot of fear. It's better to stick with what you know than to risk stepping outside your comfort zone and maybe facing failure. So fear is a big factor and driver behind self-sabotage. And then finally, E is excessive need for control. So really finding that you've got to, and again, you'll find that the fear of the unknown and the need for control tend to be, intertwined, as all of these are. Just like the list of the signs that we went through, it's never so cut and dry. It's everything is systemic, so things affect each other. So the low self-concept, the internalized beliefs, the fear of the unknown, and the excessive need for control. Those are the four things that she has defined as being the key drivers behind self-sabotage. And there's actually sorry, I don't have her web address at hand, but Dr. Judy Ho, if you look it up on any search engine, you'll find her, and she has on her website, I think she has an actual quiz you can do where you can see what are the biggest risks to your self-sabotage, or what are the biggest drivers. So you'll find people that are really strong in one of those four areas, or one or two, and then you can start to look at that area of your life, get some coaching, get some therapy, or do things that help build your awareness and confidence in that area. So, do you find any of those apply to yourself?
Sure. I mean, interesting. I mean, I haven't heard about that acronym, but I was reflecting when you were reading them up that we touch upon that point. We touch upon that point, and I mean, all of these I can recognize a lot of them in myself, but otherwise in people around me or people that I've been working with. So I mean, I guess it's really, this is really common stuff that we're talking about, right? So because we talked about the lack of confidence, or the low self-concept, or the self-esteem part. We talked about the internal beliefs. We talked about big false assumptions, big assumptions. We talked about fears, and we definitely talked about the excessive control part as well.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that we were able to. That kind of frames a lot of the things that we were talking about, and I wasn't even aware of it. So that's a good sign.
It gives it some structure, right? And so, and then when you look at these four areas, you can start to look at, recognize that it's not necessarily in your whole life that it's causing you to undermine yourself. It could be just certain areas. Like, when I think about us having this conversation, that's really easy to do. I'm really comfortable, talking to you. But if I start to think about, oh well, a lot of other people could be listening, or if I were to take these topics and then have to give a lecture in front of 1,000 people, all of a sudden, I may get a little bit more shaky, right? So, and that I can look at. Okay, so what is it about my about my self-concept? Am I afraid of being, or is it a fear? Am I going to be judged by those people? So when we have these conversations, I don't think about the fact that other people could be listening, although obviously we hope they are. But it's it's so that could be if I were to say, well, I don't want to. Let's say we got some negative comments and. Which of course we wouldn't, and then I go, hey Toby, I don't want to do this podcast anymore, because that whole fear of being judged and not wanting to have to deal with that kind of criticism. Though that would be a reaction where I would. All these great conversations that we could have in the future, I would stop just because of my own fear in that area. So you can look at the different areas of your life, whether it be, like I said, relationships or your career or just your own personal development, where you don't want to try new things or grow because, well, you're just going to fail anyway, or that might point out a deficit in yourself, which is actually a good thing because then you can change it. So yeah, I think though all of those things can help people reflect, and we all have the ability to grow. Nobody's perfect, and it's just important to recognize that we could all be so much more if we didn't stand in our own way. That's usually it's what I'm so grateful when people come for coaching, because it just shows that they value themselves enough to spend the time and resources to go through that process and challenge themselves and stop the kind of behaviors that are undermining the things that they want in life.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and you just brought up another part of it that I don't want to dig into this too much, but when you talk about feedback, or how that can trigger these, if I refer to the line again, so these below the line behaviors now, like, it's we want to defend, want to justify things, why we're doing things, rather than just, okay, listen to it, take it for what it is, and work with. And it just highlights some of the difficulties of working with feedback as well. That if we frame it in a context that's not working for the other individual, you see what kind of behavior is going to come out. It's just going to be pushing it away, not want to listen to it, and in the worst case scenario, just not doing it anymore, just run away, right? So
yeah. I find that that's a big. That's a big issue that we have in the modern world with a lot of our digital communication. We find more and more what's polarizing people is these echo chambers, and I'm going off on a tangent here, but people will look to they'll put themselves out there when they know they're going to get people that are going to confirm their opinion, or just be people giving positive feedback. So they'll put themselves out only in those directions where they know they're going to get the feedback that they want. It's like fishing for compliments, right? And so what happens is, if you're only engaging in those areas where you know you're going to get positive feedback, or you're only going to engage with people that are going to tell you what you want to hear, that creates this distorted perception of of reality, of the world, of yourself. And that's another way to undermine, your own growth and your own ability to change, is when you get stuck in these ideals, whether it's politics or anything that you have an opinion on. So yeah, I hadn't even thought about that as a way that, or a mechanism that people will undermine their own ability to grow and change is by these echo chambers that develop, only really accessing or feeding yourself information that is going to confirm the things that you already believe. I think there's a real risk in that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of that ladder of inference, right? Where we're just justifying our own assumptions all the time. And then, that could be a very, just linking it to self-sabotage, that could perhaps be a very unconscious part of self-sabotage. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's all linked. It's all systemic. I love that you
Yeah,
bring
it
up
is.
the ladder of inference because that came up when I did my CBT certification, and I think it's all super helpful. I love that you remind me of the tools that I haven't used in a while. So
We'll
anyway,
talk about that more next time.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's great. I think we've probably covered a lot of ground here, and I hope it's been helpful. It's been a great conversation for me, even though I actually had some very clear ideas of what I wanted to talk about today. It's still, as always, it leads into new and fascinating directions. So,
Yeah,
so
sorry if I pulled you off track today.
not at all. Please do more of that, because we kind of think we've got it all figured out, and then we start to talk to people about it and realize, actually, I hadn't thought of that. So hopefully for all our listeners, hopefully we've done the same to you. So I think if you find that in life you're not getting or if there are areas where you find you're not making progress and you can't understand why, or you see your own kind of self getting in your way and you can't figure out why you're standing in your own way, it's probably some form of self-sabotage. And I encourage coaching, or talk to a friend, or take the time to self-reflect. What about you, Toby? Any other last words about self-sabotage?
I mean, today I've been going back to the spectrum part all the time. That's some strengths and a weakness that it really shows that how that can be a double-edged sword, and then there's a balance between everything. So just creating awareness about that spectrum, that balance of what's working for me and what's hindering me, what's supporting me. I agree. This is a really good coaching topic. So, to get some kind of support and insights of what would be helping for you. I think if it's through a professional coach or a friend or whatever, but just bringing that awareness up, it's a really powerful conversation.
Fantastic. Okay, I think we're going to leave it there. I think we've gone over, we've definitely gone over an hour again, but I find we can talk endlessly about a lot of these topics. But for those of you who've lasted this long, thanks for sticking with us. Thanks for tuning in. And I just want to close off by saying, if you are watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It's a great way to allow other people or bring other people in contact with it. For those people listening to the podcast, thanks so much. This is really about giving back and sharing with people. So it makes it worthwhile when we know other people are listening. And we'd really invite you to leave your comments, give us feedback, or ask us to cover certain topics. And you can reach Toby through LinkedIn. You've got your LinkedIn site there at Tobias Demker, and then with me, my website, peterteuscher.com. Feel free to reach out, drop us a note, an email, leave a comment on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this, and we'll bring it up in our conversations. So with that, Toby, have a great day. As always, great conversation, and I look forward to talking to you soon. And I look forward to doing another one when the rest of our listeners join us. All right? Have a great day.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.